All right, well, good morning, everyone. A year ago, the Dobbs decision overturned Roe versus Wade, and since then, over the course of the past year, we watched coordinated and extremist attacks on abortion access happening in legislatures and in courtrooms across the country. But as about half the states have turned the clock backward, here in Connecticut, we have been moving forward to protect women's reproductive rights. We're here today to say abortion is safe, legal, and protected here in Connecticut. And even as we watch those mounting attacks outside of our state, we have worked to protect the rights of women and their health care providers. We've been a national leader, and this is something that we've seen in our state going back to the Griswold versus Connecticut case in 1965, to codifying Roe versus Wade into our state law, and to the recently passed Reproductive Freedom Act. So we've stood strong, and the governor and I and our legislative partners have made reproductive health care a priority. And so today's bills demonstrate Connecticut's commitment to expanding access for women to reproductive health care. So first, we'll be signing a bill that will allow pharmacists to prescribe certain types of birth control without patients having to go to a doctor first. This is really important because it breaks down barriers for women because they don't have to see a doctor first. And it especially helps women who are in underserved areas and healthcare deserts. Second, we're protecting providers following Connecticut law from any adverse action taken by other states, such as suspending or revoking medical licenses. And we are requiring our higher education institutions that have on-campus residences to develop a plan to address students' access to reproductive health care, including contraception, abortion, and gender-affirming care. And finally, we have taken action to protect the privacy of patients' health care data online as well. So we've seen incredible progress and strides made in our state, and we are continuing to work with our legislative partners and our administration as well to make sure that women are protected here in our state. The governor and I have been very determined and have made it a priority, and we're thrilled that our legislative partners have been leading the way across our country. So we want the women of Connecticut and the women across the country to know that we are going to continue to fight for reproductive health care access and freedom in our country. So with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce a woman who has been leading the way in our state legislature as the co-chair of the Reproductive Rights Caucus, State Representative Jillian Gilchrist.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and I want to thank all of the members of the Reproductive Rights Caucus who are here and not with us today for their advocacy this legislative session, in particular my co-chair, Representative Matt Blumenthal, and also leadership in the various committees that worked on this important legislation: the Public Health Committee, the Higher Education Committee, the General Law Committee, and the Judiciary Committee. I am so proud that Connecticut continues to prioritize reproductive rights and health. And the legislation we have passed and that the governor will sign into law will expand protections for those seeking abortion care here in our state, will increase access to emergency contraception and birth control, and will improve maternal health throughout the state of Connecticut. Today is a particularly special day for me because I am joined by my family. I have my daughter Edith, my sister Katie, my nieces Reese and Arilee, and my nephew ZJ here with me. And as we think back to the Supreme Court decision in Dobbs, when all of us had a collective gasp at what was going to happen across this country, those of us here in Connecticut were horrified by what women and individuals would experience across this country, but we also could experience a sense of relief because the legislators who came before us had codified Roe v. Wade into law, protecting us. And so today, as I look at my sister's children and my children, who are ages 14, 11, 9, and 7, I think to myself about the fact that the legislation we're passing here today is certainly protecting Connecticut citizens today, but it's also protecting our young adults and our children. And it's saying to them that we value you, we believe you, and we want to ensure that you get to live free, to make the best decisions for yourself, and to live a life where you're protected and you have choice over your decisions and your body. And so thank you, Governor Lamont, for signing this important legislation into state law today.
None of this legislation would have been possible without the support of our legislative leadership, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Senator Bob Duff.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here and to celebrate these very important bills that are going to be signed today. As we've seen across the country, this war on women continues across this nation, and we've seen it most recently in Iowa, we've seen it in South Carolina, we've seen it in Florida, Arkansas, and many other states where the rights of women are being curtailed. And here in Connecticut, what we're seeing is we're seeing more protections for women across our state, and we're saying to women across this country, you are safe here. We will not release your medical records to attorneys general who wants to dip into your privacy and your access to your abilities to make those decisions for yourself. And so Connecticut is going to continue to move in the opposite direction from those other states that are taking away women's rights. And we've seen across this country, whether you're in a red state or a blue state, women believe and know and understand, and men do as well, that women have the right to control their bodies and the right to make those decisions. So I am so proud of Connecticut and the stance we're taking and the values that we have here today through this legislation. Last thing I'll just say is that while the ideas are often very simple and to do, the ideas are very simple, getting the policy is a little bit more complicated. And I say that especially as we look at some of the data privacy rules that we have put together. And thanks to Senator Maroney and the General Law Committee, I'm putting that forward for women so that they have that privacy as well. And I want to thank all those today who are behind me, of course, the Lieutenant Governor, our Governor, the Reproductive Caucus, those who have worked so hard on this legislation, my colleagues in the Senate and the House on both sides of the aisle. This is an issue that we have to continue to work on, and we have to push against the tide that we see in other states where they are taking away women's rights, and I'm just proud to stand here with my colleagues. And lastly, I'd just say thanks also not only just to the legislators, but for our advocacy groups as well, NARAL, Planned Parenthood, others who are at the forefront of these issues and pushing the legislature to make sure that we get these things across the finish line. Thank you so much.
My pleasure to introduce the other co-chair of the Reproductive Rights Caucus, State Representative Matt Blumenthal.
Thank you, Madam Lieutenant Governor. It's a great pleasure to be here today with so many reproductive rights champions. And you can see from the huge bipartisan, bicameral coalition behind us at the Reproductive Rights Caucus is not only accomplishing great things across the board for people across the state, but will continue to do so in the future. And a year ago, when the Dobbs decision was handed down, reversing almost a half-century of precedent confirming a fundamental right for people in this country, especially women, we were horrified, we were devastated, and we were spurred to action. In fact, we had already taken action to pass the Reproductive Freedom Defense Act in anticipation of this terrible decision. And we have seen in the past year, unfortunately, across the country, some of our worst nightmares come to pass in terms of some of the extreme and barbaric anti-choice and anti-woman legislation that we've seen in some of these anti-choice states. But Connecticut has worked constantly and consistently, along with our advocates and our healthcare professionals, to take every measure at our disposal to protect the rights and the health care of people here in the state of Connecticut, and not only to protect them from the attacks that we're seeing across the country, but to expand access. Because as we all know, a right means nothing if you can't access it. And so the legislative agenda that we accomplished this session, thanks to the amazing legislators and advocates that are here with us today, is a testament to that. We here in the Reproductive Rights Caucus will take every measure to protect people's rights, to seek and obtain the health care that they need and deserve, but we're also going to ensure that every aspect of reproductive health care is accessible to the maximum ability here in the state of Connecticut. And that means ensuring that every person, regardless of whether they live in Bridgeport or Basra, can obtain that health care affordably, accessibly, and safely. So I want to say a big thank you to all these legislators, all these advocates, the leadership in both houses, and especially to this administration and the governor and lieutenant governor who have made this a huge priority of theirs and committed not only themselves and their political capital, but the agencies that help run our state to make sure that this legislative agenda and this policy agenda comes to fruition. So thank you so much, and we look forward to working hard in the future as well.
Matt, thank you so much, and thank you for acknowledging some of our great commissioners. And we have here with us our DCP Commissioner, Brian Caffarelli, and also our DPH Commissioner, Manisha Jutani. We thank them for all of their work on this important legislation. So one of the people who has made the protection of women a strong priority in our state legislature is Senator May Flexer, who represents thousands of college students across Connecticut. Senator Flexer, please give us a few words.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be here today to celebrate the incredible work of so many people on this key legislation that is now the law of the land here in our state of Connecticut. So many people worked so diligently this year and last year to make sure that Connecticut continues to be a national leader in affirming that in our state, people have control over their own individual bodies, no matter what. And we're going to do everything we can to be at the forefront of that. I'm so grateful that we have leadership like Lieutenant Governor Susan Bysowitz and Governor Ned Lamont, who are at the forefront of making sure that is the reality here in our state, and so many of my colleagues who worked on a vast array of policies that we're talking about here this morning. I want to just narrow in on the one that I got to work on most closely and tell you how I was able to have that opportunity. Representative Greg Haddad and I have the great privilege of representing the students at the University of Connecticut in Storrs. And last summer, those students were terrified. You know, I woke up, like many of you last summer, as someone who had enjoyed the autonomy to make my own decisions about my own body for the vast majority of my adult life. And these young people who were just entering their adulthood woke up one day and saw that that might be ripped away from them. And they were terrified. But they didn't just sit there in their fears and talk to each other about being scared. They instead said, what can we do to make this better? What can we do to make sure that we have better access to health care here at UConn? What can we do to make sure college students across our state have better access to health care? And they reached out to Greg and I, and we were able to work with some of our other colleagues like Representative Farrar, Senator Slapp, Senator Kelly in a bipartisan, bicameral fashion to work on this wonderful piece of legislation that expands access to health care for all college students. I think it's a real shining example of how you can take concern that you have in this moment when so many things in our country are under attack and actually make change happen. These young people did an absolutely incredible thing, and I'm so grateful to them for the leadership that they demonstrated. And I'm hopeful that this coalition of leaders behind me, we will work together in the future to do even more advancement in terms of access to reproductive health care. There's still a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of issues with access to health care, particularly across eastern Connecticut, the region of the state that I have the privilege of representing. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, but with strong leaders like those here today, I know we'll be able to get it done, especially if we listen to the voices of young people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Flexer. It's my pleasure to bring up a powerful advocate for health care in our state, State Senator and Dr. Saud Anwar.
Thank you. Good morning, Lieutenant Governor. Good morning, everyone. I'm proud to be part of a state where the legislators, the leaders, and the community members have clearly stated that anyone with a uterus has every right to make every decision about what grows inside of them, what takes their blood, what is going to have an impact on their well-being and their survival, or can be healthy for them or unhealthy for them, and what would have an impact on their future. And we will, as a state, make sure that some of the policies in some of the other states will not have a negative impact on the clinicians who are going to provide equal access to individuals in our state. And this is what this session was about as well, because in some parts of our country, they are targeting individuals who are providing care. Now, abortions will be provided to individuals, but this was about taking the right of an abortion away from the individuals who do not have access to health care, who are poor, and putting their lives at risk. This was a life and death issue. We have chosen life of our citizens to be able to make sure that we protect the women, and also make sure that the clinicians are going to be protected and they will not be targeted with the hunt that is going on in other parts of our country. This is very clear where we stand. I am honored to be part of the community. I'm honored that our governor, our lieutenant governor, my fellow legislators, the team is united, and the Public Health Committee, which I'm honored to co-chair, was very clear where we stood on this. And also, this is we are also in a state where when we passed this bill, of the 36 senators, 35 voted in favor of this. We should be proud of that. Thank you.
Senator, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to introduce the other co-chair of the Public Health Committee, a great leader, Representative Kristen McCarthy-Vahey.
Thank you, Madam Lieutenant Governor, and to every single person gathered here today. I'm looking especially at the pink shirt and the purple people, as I often call them. Becoming a parent is one of the most consequential decisions that many of us make in our lives. And it should be a decision that we get to make. These bills that we have passed, and that the governor, thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Governor Lamont, provide us options. And we've heard about some of those options today: protecting privacy, protecting our providers. As Matt said earlier, we need to make sure we have access. But the other part of what we haven't talked about today is gender-affirming care. These This bill, 6820 in particular from the Public Health Committee, also protects providers who are providing gender-affirming care. So though I think a lot about what it means for people of childbearing age to make their own choices, and I also think about the fact that 33% of state legislators around this country are women, where we're more than half the population. And in so many states, men are making the decisions as to what we as women and people of childbearing years get to do with our bodies. Here in Connecticut, we stand together, women and men, people of all genders, to say, no, not here, not on our watch. And we also stand in solidarity and strong support of the providers who are providing that gender-affirming care. I'm so honored to be standing here as maybe an unlikely advocate. Growing up in a family who was solidly pro-life, as they called themselves, I'm very grateful to be joined and to be a part of this movement. And this is a movement for freedom, for choice, for access, and for dignity. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce someone who has made it a priority to protect the privacy of all of us, as so much information exists about us all online. State Senator James Maroney.
Thank you. I'll make it brief and just say I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of all my colleagues. I thank you for the introduction, and it's been a great honor to work with all of my colleagues here, but especially with Representative Gilchrist, Representative Blumenthal, Representative McCarthy-Vey, Representative Kidd, over the past year working on data privacy. And so much of our lives has moved online now. We carry our phones with us everywhere. We're generating data and being tracked. And I was proud to work to make sure that we're protecting that data. In Connecticut, we've decided and said that if you want to choose to have a family, that's your choice. And if you want to look for that information and seek that care, and as we protected as not only reproductive health care, but gender-affirming health care data. And so it's the efforts to seek that, so any searches on that will be protected. And then not only that, if you do choose to have a family with SB3, we said that we want to protect your children when they go online, and we've created one of the strongest children's data privacy bills in the country. So it's been a great honor to work with them, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak about the bill.
There were so many advocates that worked for the legislation that we are signing into law today. We're going to have one speaker who's going to speak on behalf of all of the powerful advocates who have been with us at every step of the way. And it's my pleasure to introduce Gretchen Raffa, Vice President of Planned Parenthood of Southern New England.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. My name is Gretchen Raffa, Vice President of Public Policy Advocacy and Organizing with Planned Parenthood of Southern New England. And first, I just want to extend such gratitude and thanks to the Governor, Governor Lamont, Lieutenant Governor Bysowitz, and the entire administration who have made it a priority to protect and expand sexual and reproductive health care. I've had the pleasure of working with the Reproductive Rights Caucus and so many legislators over my 18-year career at Planned Parenthood in Connecticut. And I just want to start with expressing gratitude on behalf of the entire advocacy community. So many of our coalition and community partners are in the room with us today. This is a group effort. We do not do anything alone in this building when we are working on policy change. And I want to just say again, thank you to our legislative champions, our administration, for taking bold action in the last 2 years to protect our health, expand our access to health care, and protect our rights and fundamental freedoms. And what I also want to just highlight and thanks is this: we are a leader. Connecticut is a proven leader. Decades of long and hard-fought battles to get to the point we are today have been won with bipartisan support, and that is something to celebrate when we are watching the attacks across this country. Since the Dobbs decision last June, the abortion access landscape has become even more fractured. We continue to face the devastating and inhumane consequences of abortion bans and restrictions on both patients' health, but the larger healthcare ecosystem. You've heard me say this before. Right now in the United States, 1 in 3 women and more trans and non-binary people have lost access to abortion in their home states because 20 states have either completely banned abortion or severely restricted it. There is no doubt that this crisis is going to continue to worsen, and we know who these bans are continuing to impact the most. Black folks, Latino, Indigenous communities, LGBTQ+ people, people living with disabilities, people with low incomes, people living in the most rural areas of our state and states across this country, and other groups who continue to face the greatest barriers to health care due to systemic racism and discriminatory policies that continue to get enacted. They will be the folks that continue to bear the brunt of these attacks. So that's why it's so urgent that we continue to fight back in our state. During this year alone, since the Dobbs decision, Planned Parenthood of Southern New England has seen a 56% increase in patients that have traveled from the 18 states that have banned abortion, and we know that number will increase since North Carolina and Nebraska have enacted their laws. And that's why the patient and provider protection laws that we've enacted over the last 2 years are so necessary in this moment. Also, as you heard from Senator Maroney, strengthening privacy and confidentiality protections for reproductive health and gender-affirming care is absolutely urgent, because we know the anti-abortion movement will stop at nothing to threaten people's lives and their health. All people, no matter who they are, should have access to their personal health care decisions, making that access to care with privacy, safety, security, and with dignity to make those health care decisions for themselves. But again, we know that the anti-abortion politicians and judges were never satisfied with just overturning Roe. This was a decades-long fight in the making, and they are continuing their fight to try to pass a nationwide abortion ban. They are coming for our birth control. Yes, they are coming for our birth control, and they are aggressively and viciously attacking trans health care, with 19 states banning or severely restricting gender-affirming care for young people. They're coming for sex education. They are coming for anything they can to control our bodies and our lives. So again, that is why the leadership that the Lamont administration, the General Assembly, the entire administration, their leadership that they are demonstrating in this moment really does make a mark on the history of our country in advancing and protecting and defending reproductive freedom. It is so critical that we keep fighting, and Planned Parenthood is committed to continuing the fight with all of the folks in the room and outside in our communities all across Connecticut until every resident in our state and those people who have to travel to our state to access essential life-saving care has the ability and the resources to control their bodies, their lives, and their futures. Thank you so much to the governor and the entire
Gretchen, thank you so much. It's now my pleasure to introduce my partner in government who has made equality for women the centerpiece of his administration, Governor Ned Lamont.
Look, you've all been so incredibly eloquent. I was just thinking as I listened to each and every one of you, and I'm proud to be able to serve with each and every one of you. I've had more occasion to say the Pledge of Allegiance over the last 5 years than I have in the previous 50 years. And I welcome that opportunity, but remember the words. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With liberty and justice for all. Not with liberty and justice for all unless you're a woman of childbearing age who happens to live in Florida or Texas or one of a dozen other countries. With liberty and justice for all. These are the American values. And I love what we're doing in Connecticut and standing tall, and hopefully other states follow in our lead. But I do also worry that it's a rearguard action. And I see what's coming on out of Washington, D.C. And we saw it in the Dobbs decision that just shocked the hell out of our system. And I see a lot of the bills coming out of Congress right now. And there's a group called the Freedom Caucus. All they want to do is strip away our rights and our freedoms. And those are civil rights, those are reproductive rights, those are gay rights, limit our freedoms. Connecticut and the folks I'm standing on here want to do everything you can to expand and protect your rights and freedoms. And we're doing that because it's the right thing to do, and we're always going to stand tall. And I ought to say also, it's a smart thing to do. You maybe saw CNBC just the other day said Connecticut is one of the best states in the country to live and work. To live and work. And I think they said that because they love the fact that we have expanded daycare and the best K-12 education and parks and beaches. I also think they said that, and they said that explicitly because of our values and what we stand for, and the fact that we respect women, the fact that we respect families, respect you to make the right choices for yourself and your families. And I think that makes a difference for the state, and I hope we send the signal loud and clear, and I hope Washington picks up this message and forwards what we got to do so we don't have to keep playing this rearguard action. Thanks to each and every one of you.
So, Governor, we're going to have you sign some bills, and then we'll do on-topic questions right after. On-topic. We're going to do on-topic questions. All right, let's have some quiet so we can hear. Ken?
Exposure of extradited to, let's say, doctor being extradited from military.
is, and we're going to call on Matt Blumenthal for that. Right, Matt?
Thank you, Madam Lieutenant Governor. So last year's bill, the Reproductive Freedom Defense Act, addressed extradition and protected providers and, frankly, everyone from being extradited to the maximum level allowed by the U.S. Constitution. And I can get into more detail later, but I don't think everyone's interested in the particulars. The bill we passed on provider protections and that Representative McCarthy-Vahey and Senator Anwar led on in the Public Health Committee protects providers from any adverse consequences against their licenses, their malpractice insurance, their privileges, or their credentials. So essentially protecting them professionally from any consequences for care that they've provided that's safe, legal, and within the standard of care that's being attacked by someone in another state.
What about the extradition itself? The governor can't reject another state's order of extradition, right?
The governor can. So what our law says now is that unless unless the individual has fled from the state that is requesting their extradition, if the care is legal here in the state of Connecticut, the governor will refuse to extradite that individual. And that's the maximum protection allowed under the U.S. Constitution's extradition clause.
We have laws, but we don't have a constitutional amendment. Laws can change. Majorities and legislatures can change. Why? And just advocates and legislators on this issue are divided over whether or not Connecticut should have a constitutional amendment. Can you assure that access will be available in Connecticut short of constitutional amendment?
I love the constitutional amendment idea myself, but Senator Flexler, come up here and feel free to disagree or agree.
I'm hopeful that we'll find consensus on this issue, and I think we need to be reflective. I think in Connecticut, as we talked about this morning, leaders around reproductive health care have been here in the legislature for many decades, doing everything they could to make sure that access to health care was protected. I think a fair criticism of the national reproductive rights movement from the Roe decision moving forward was that they weren't aggressive enough in many ways. There should have been a federal protection that was put in place. We had many opportunities to do that when Democrats controlled Washington. It didn't happen. And so I think it would be a mistake to not do every single thing we can now when we have strong, not just Democratic support, but bipartisan support here in Connecticut for reproductive health care. And so I'm hopeful that over the next couple of years, our coalition will continue to grow and we will move forward with a constitutional amendment, because that, I think, is the next step for ensuring that no matter who serves in this legislature and in the governor's office, that the rights of people will be enshrined in our state's constitution and give us the strongest protections possible moving forward.
There are differences, though, within the coalition as to political strategy on that. So what's the other side of that coin within the coalition, not opponents of abortion rights?
I can't necessarily speak for everyone in the coalition in terms of what their viewpoint is on this. I think, frankly, passing a constitutional amendment takes a lot of work. I've had the pleasure to work on those on a number of different areas, whether it was early voting that we were just so successful with this year. But I think there's got to be a real infrastructure in place, like there was with early voting, to make sure that voters are educated on what the question is before them, and to make sure that we get the language right, which was another important issue in the long conversation we've had about early voting and absentee voting, which will be on the ballot for voters next year. And so I think sometimes to do things right, it takes a little bit of time, and I'm hopeful that time is passing and the work is happening and the conversations are happening, and we'll be able to move forward soon.
One follow-up on that. What about the political impacts? Because when there is a question such as that on the ballot, people organizations on both sides of that issue, it's something to organize and rally around. So what is your sense as to what would be the political impact, whatever years that makes it to the ballot?
Well, I think those of us who agree that people should have control over their own bodies to make their own health care decisions understand that in every single election, that question is on the ballot. It's on the ballot in this November of 2023. It's on the ballot in November of 2024. It's on the ballot in every election. So our coalition doesn't need to be reminded that our choices, our freedom is on the line every single time people cast their votes.
Any other on topics?
What are effective dates for these 3 bills that were decided today?
All right, Jillian. Jillian and Matt. There's 3 of them or 4 of them.
We believe they are currently effective as of July 1.
So people can start to see these impacts soon?
Yes, they will see them immediately.
Specifically with the pharmacist prescribing birth control, what needs to be done in terms of training? I know before the bill was passed, there was discussions about sort of training programs for these pharmacists to be able to do this. So if someone's thinking,
we actually have someone from the pharmaceutical industry here who can answer that, because you're right, there's professional training that needs to happen.
Good morning. Didn't expect to speak today. I'm Rod Marriott with the Department of Consumer Protection's Drug Control Division, and I'm responsible for drafting those regulations. We are working through those now. We hope to get them into kind of our process of approvals within the next week or 2, should everything go well, and we'll do everything from outlining the process of education and the requirements for education to the record-keeping requirements as well.
Do you expect many pharmacies, like big chains or independents, to follow with this legislation?
I believe so. We've seen a lot of it go on in other states. We're not the first state to do this, which gives us a nice template to work from, which made writing the regulations that much easier. So we're hoping that they all participate and provide this option to as many patients as possible.
Did you get a sense from them that they wanted to? Were there any discussions?
Very little resistance, if not interest in being a part of it.
What's the realistic date for regulation review committee to?
I don't have that off the top of my head, Ken, sorry. I hope sooner. It all depends on all those processes and how many questions we get about the regs when they go out to public comment.
I can make a quick comment about one of the questions was that if the pharmacies would participate, the pharmacists will be required to actually listen, and then if they cannot provide that care, they will have to refer to a space in a pharmacy where the requests can be fulfilled.
What about the FDA's approval over the over-the-counter
I think that's fantastic. It may take a while for those pills to be available, but I think that's great. And in the interim, we will allow pharmacists to provide access. And also, one of the things that are included is not just contraception, but emergency contraception. So I think pharmacists are still going to be important in that effort, even with the FDA's new approval. All right, thanks, everybody.